So right now the Abbey and the surrounding area is inundated with a thick cloud of smoke. We can infer that there is a fire, and indeed there is one about 40 miles from here in a beautiful part of our land here called Noisy Creek. And so we can infer if there's smoke, there must be fire, and there is indeed about 2,000 acres right now burning. And so this is one of the things that we don't have much control over. Those external conditions, circumstances that we don't have much say. It's, a little bit disruptive in that we're going to start confining ourselves indoors a little bit more for some of us who have some respiratory issues, maybe. So there's a little bit of self-concern for the health and well-being of the community and our guests right now during the Exploring Monastic Life program. But however, because we are bodhisattvas in training, we will do our best to expand our minds outward, to think about all of the beings whose home this forest that's now burning is, where they reside. Maybe some have lost their lives. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them have been displaced. Some have no ability to escape. Small little things that can't crawl that fast. Larger animals that can bolt and run for their lives. And so we open our hearts with compassion towards that situation. And with this bodhicitta motivation, as limited and as fabricated as it is, it's a wonderful training to turn our minds to that long-term, deep aspiration to become awakened. So that when the suffering arises and we have to look at it directly, we will not collapse into personal distress, but we will see that that is the nature of cyclic existence. Its very nature is unsatisfactory, insecure, impermanent. And even from its own side, as much as the smoke seems real solid and real, you can smell it, you can see it, it lacks any inherent existence. That we turn our minds to this deep aspiration to become awakened as quickly as we can, in order to free all beings from this cycle where they are endangered, where they experience the dukkha of pain, the dukkha of change, and all-pervasive conditioned dukkha. And tonight, as we follow the bodhisattva path and we share the Dharma on the bodhisattva way, may we be able to touch very deeply in our hearts that motivation, to be of the greatest benefit and to become awakened solely for that purpose. So let's take a moment to touch base with that. So we are in our fire season. So good evening, everybody. Venerable Chujin has been teaching during the Exploring Monastic Life, so she requested that some of the Abbey monastics do some of the teachings on Thursday and Friday. So last night Venerable Tarpa did the one on debate, and tonight I'm going to continue with the Gomchen Lamrim, and she suggested that we maybe do some exploration, starting to think about the 6 far-reaching practices. So it was kind of a quick turnaround, so I'm going to give it my best shot. As Venerable Jigme said, I'm going to do my very best and be content with that. And so I'm going to have Geshe Zopa, who the Lamrim Chenmo is a remarkable it's a remarkable text, and Lama Tsongkhapa does an amazing commentary on it. But for some reason, my karma is much more strongly affiliated or connected to Geshe Zopa, who did Steps on the Path of Enlightenment a number of years ago, and this entire volume is on the way of the Bodhisattva. So I have used Geshe Zopa's wisdom in this book to help me to sort of wrap my mind around what I wanted to share tonight in regards to the 6 far-reaching practices. And hopefully we'll get to generosity. one of the things that becomes really apparent when you start reading this commentary is that the first third of the book is sort of like preparing our minds to be able to train in the 6 far-reaching practices. And quite a large bit of it is like, as Venerable said, if you really want to you want to market something and convince people that there's great benefit, you're going to try to market it by saying all of its benefits and all of its advantages. And so there's quite a bit of this book that has all of the advantages and all of the wonderful incentives on why it's important to practice the 6 far-reaching practices. So I'm going to try to kind of get our minds in the mood for being able to hear the teachings on the 6 far-reaching practices. I did try to go to the Gomchen Lamrim outline, but I'm not quite sure. There's all sorts of subheadings here. I'm going to generally cover quite a few of them tonight. How to train in the great vehicle in particular. How the precepts are included in them. Certainty with regard to the number of topics, why they are in the order they are, in terms of accomplishing the 2 goals, the 2 welfares. I didn't have enough time to really scout these out specifically, but I think I've caught flavor of a number of the headings, so hopefully that will at least get us started tonight. So first of all, Venerable has been teaching on the Bodhisattva ethical restraints for quite some time now. We just finished them last week. And they're called ethical restraints, which support us in examining and challenging deeply the ways that we think, what our motivation is for doing what we do. So each restraint, if you can recall, I'll give you a little bit of an example. As we'll go to the ones around generosity, is that they're letting us know how, if we want to generate bodhicitta, we need to restrain in this way. Acting out selfish thoughts of desire to gain material possessions, not answering sincerely asked questions that you're capable of answering, not accepting invitations. So the ethical restraints are really helping us to restrain our minds in different states of afflictions that are totally counterproductive to wanting to generate bodhicitta. It's like if you have this mind is counter to bodhicitta, it's not helpful. So the ethical restraints are all about really learning to restrain certain afflictive states of mind that are totally the antithesis of being able to generate bodhicitta. And that turning the mind from the motivation of the self-centered thought and self-concern and just all about me to really slowly turning the mind in wanting to benefit others. The Bodhisattva ethical restraints really clear the mind of mental obstacles to developing our bodhicitta. And what I get a sense of as I've been getting ready for this teaching, and also I've been looking at the far-reaching practices for some time now, is that by training in the ethical restraints and training in the far-reaching practices, we are becoming much more committed to generating this awakening mind. I mean, as fabricated as it still is, because we're really looking at mind training, we're really looking at our motivation on why we engage the world, what kind of thinking, what compels us, what inspires us, what drives our actions of body and speech. And so by taking the ethical restraints, or at least thinking about them, and including aspiring bodhicitta, to have this aspiration someday to be able to become a Buddha in order to benefit others, is that we really become more committed to bodhicitta, and that the restraints and the far-reaching practices really do support us. That they are the precepts that we take not only in this life, but unlike our pratimoksha precepts, we take them from now until awakening, so they go with us in our continuity of mind from now until awakening. So it is a mind of commitment to becoming awakened and to sentient beings for the purpose of guiding them. So we may not be able to keep them well, the far-reaching practices, we may not have the best motivation, they may be mixed with afflictions, but by really getting ourselves on board with the bodhisattva practices, we're really going to be able to counteract the self-centered thought, and in particular to counteract the 8 worldly concerns. I mean, so much of our countless lives have been quite preoccupied with, what's in it for me? How can I be how can I be benefit? How can I be helped? How can I be happy? And in the advanced scope, we're starting to really focus our mind on turning it not so much about me, but a whole lot more about others. And the restraints and the 6 far-reaching practices are so specifically getting our minds to train in that way. So that's where we're kind of heading. Venerable has been leading us with the aspiring bodhicitta, and then the ethical restraints for the past few months. We've done the 7-point cause and effect instructions. We've done equalizing, exchanging self and others. This is all sort of nourishing, getting us warmed up to the idea that the bodhicitta mind is possible, that there are causes for bodhicitta, and that they are laid out very, very clearly in the Buddha's teachings. One of the things also that we have to remember is that the cause, great compassion is the cause for bodhicitta. It is the root of the Mahayana. All practices stem from it. And it's called great compassion, first of all, because great is referring to the objects of our compassion, which is all sentient beings without exception. And compassion is the deep desire to take on the responsibility of alleviating all of their misery. It's critical at the beginning of our bodhisattva practice when we're really kind of on a little bit shaky ground. This whole idea of bodhicitta is just so big we're not sure. So it really inspires us by seeing the suffering of others and connecting with our own suffering and realizing that we really want to free them. Then in the middle of the bodhisattva path where, we're really starting to purify, we're really starting to see the more subtle self-centered thought, the afflictions arising. And then at the end, when we become awakened, this compassion is just simultaneously arising moment by moment by moment. So great compassion is a very important foundation for the bodhisattva practices to be able to generate bodhicitta. It's sort of like the earth. It supports all aspects of the great vehicle, and without it, it is really impossible to begin the great bodhisattva training. So it's just to remember always that great compassion is sort of what we're standing on as far as our bodhicitta goes. And that the 6 far-reaching practices are the way in which the bodhisattvas engage with their bodhicitta. Because Geshe Sopa says, bodhicitta, as profound as it is a thought. That thought needs to be followed then by actions, and that's where the 6 far-reaching practices really train us not only mentally, but they also train us to be able to engage our body and speech in order to benefit all beings, and to create the causes for our awakening. Because Geshe Sopa says there are limitless sentient beings, and many of them behave very badly. And that great compassion helps us not to get discouraged and throw in the towel on sentient beings and go for our own liberation. Because, as Venerable Jigme said today, Buddhist practice is difficult, and if we're going to become awakened, this is a long journey. And along the way, we're going to meet some very difficult, challenging sentient beings that are really under the control of their afflictions and karma and suffering terribly. So we want to be able to connect with that and our great resolve to be able to free them from that. So great compassion makes our minds very strong. And also still at the same time we have joy, hope, and courage because we know that suffering can be eliminated. Great compassion, bodhicitta, and wisdom are crucial for the bodhisattva's training. And they have to cultivate these in their minds because they will need all the skill they possibly can manage, because each living being that we meet on the bodhisattva path is going to have a very unique place in samsara. They're going to have very specific karma, very specific dispositions, very different unique forms of existence. They're going to be at different places along their spiritual path, their existence in samsara. And so bodhisattvas have really got to have the skill, the compassion, the wisdom to be able to help them wherever they are. So that's where we're going. And the unmistaken method to be able to cultivate that skill, wisdom, compassion, bodhicitta, to be able to help all living beings where they are, is the 6 far-reaching practices, which are generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. So those are the trainings. Now, one of the things about the book, which I really found very helpful, is that the Lamrim Chenmo, it has numbers of ways in how it explains how Buddhahood arises, what the main causes for Buddhahood are. And so I wanted to share some of those tonight because I find them extremely inspiring, I find them very clarifying, and I also find them very practical. So one of the ways that they categorize the main causes for Buddhahood are the method side of the path, which is conjoining conventional bodhicitta, great compassion, and the first 5 far-reaching practices. And those are specifically to accumulate the vast storehouse of merit, which results in the form body of the Buddha. All right, so when we, in the morning in a meditation hall, when we say visualize this beautiful body of light with the light emanating in all the 10 directions, and then the Buddha comes to the crown of the head and it emanates on the crowns of all sentient beings. Whatever form sentient beings need, the Buddha can simultaneously emanate that. The causes for that result is the method side of the path. So the 6 far-reaching practices, great compassion, bodhicitta, all of the trainings, all of the heart-opening practices. Now for the Dharmakaya, or the omniscient mind of the Buddha, we need the wisdom side of the path, which is the 6th of the far-reaching practices, which is to gain the direct realization of the nature of reality, how things actually exist, and to have that so deeply actualized in one's mind that it eliminates all the obstacles to omniscience. And so then we have the omniscient mind of the Buddha, which knows all objects of knowledge, has all knowledge of all the karma of all beings, where they're going to be reborn, how they're going to die. He knows, the Buddhas know all the predispositions of sentient beings. The mind knows everything. And so by practicing the wisdom side of the path, that's the cause for that result. So that's one of the ways to categorize the 6 far-reaching practices. There's also a category where joyous effort, they take that out and they say that is needed for both the method side and the wisdom side of the path, so it crosses over. So you need it for the wisdom because it takes a long time to generate the exalted wisdom realizing emptiness directly, and you need a whole bunch of joyous effort to just train our minds in these beautiful far-reaching practices and to get the spontaneous bodhicitta going where it's just like breathing. So we really need a lot of joyous effort. So that's one of the ways in which they categorize the 6 far-reaching practices, is on the method and wisdom side of the path. The other one is that they say that wisdom, the wisdom side, cuts the root of samsara, the self-grasping ignorance and the mental afflictions that arise from it. So the wisdom side, the complete cessation or abandonment of all defilements and all causes of dukkha. All right, so the complete cessation, that's the wisdom side. And then the method side is the complete cultivation of all good qualities brought to perfection. So we've got complete abandonment and complete fulfillment, or total perfection of all the good qualities, which I find these really inspiring. They're very clarifying. And then this one, the way they explain this is in Geshe Zopa's commentary. Wisdom held by method and method held by wisdom. So we're going to see what this beautiful relationship is between the wisdom side of the path and the method side of the path. Held makes it clear that one is not the other. Okay, they're held by each other, but they are not the same thing. Bodhisattvas, whatever they do, is imbued with bodhicitta. All their activities are under the power of this great compassionate desire to take responsibility for the well-being of others and to attain Buddhahood in order to do that. And that the power of this method side of the path, this beautiful bodhicitta, this great compassion, carries over into deep meditation on emptiness. Before a bodhisattva enters into their meditation on emptiness, they generate bodhicitta, so they go into the session. That session is imbued, is empowered by the bodhicitta. So they attain the realization of emptiness or deepen it in order to remove the self-grasping ignorance, in order to attain Buddhahood, but it's sort of fueled right before they go into meditative equipoise. That motivation is right there in their hearts. So it's sort of like, well, I like Venerable Jigme's analogy to like rocket fuel. All right, so it's in the mind before they get into meditative equipoise. During the meditation, the bodhisattva is only meditating on emptiness. So there is no bodhicitta manifest in their minds, but the whole session is sort of framed, Geshe Zopa says, empowered by it. This is how bodhicitta influences the meditation on emptiness, which is what wisdom held by method means. Right? So that's how they integrate, how they weave together. Not the same, but in relationship. Now, when bodhisattvas arise from their meditative equipoise, the power of their realization of emptiness carries over to their practice of the method side of the path. Generosity, ethical conduct, great compassion. And so when they go out into their day, whether they're doing prostrations, making offerings, reciting mantras, volunteering, teaching the Dharma, they understand that all of it is like a magical illusion. So they don't grasp at the things they have. They don't grasp at themselves. They don't grasp at others. They don't grasp at the outcome of what they're doing as inherently existent. So even though they are not in meditative equipoise on emptiness, while doing activities that is empowered by their prior meditative experience on the nature of reality. So this is how wisdom is held by method. All right, so they're just so beautifully, intimately related, but they're not the same. They are not separate from each other, and they are not contradictory. And this is what makes the Bodhisattva's deeds superior in all ways. And this is where far-reaching or paramita or perfection, actually how they get that name, is that these two are so intimately related to one another. That's why they become far-reaching practices. So I wanted to share with you Geshe Zopa. He loves to quote these beautiful sutra quotations, and there's a beautiful one. There's a few of them in here that really give us a sense of why these method and wisdom are so important. So from the Precious Garland, in order to benefit all beings, from this merit may I complete the accumulations of merit and wisdom and obtain the two perfect bodies that arise from merit and wisdom. In the Sutra of Showing the Tathagata's Inconceivable Secret, the accumulation of wisdom eliminates all mental afflictions. The accumulation of merit nurtures all sentient beings. Bhagavan, since this is the case, great bodhisattvas should strive for the collections of merit and wisdom. I did not, and the Buddha says in the Sutra Unraveling the Intended Meaning, I did not prophesize the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment of one who is not acting to benefit sentient beings and is not engaging in all the bodhisattva's activities. And lastly, the teachings of Vimalakirta. This is very powerful. What is bondage for bodhisattvas? What is their liberation? Bondage for bodhisattvas is taking birth in samsara without the method, so without compassion, without bodhicitta, without the six far-reaching practices. Taking birth in samsara because of the method is a bodhisattva's means for liberation. Bondage for a bodhisattva is taking birth in samsara without wisdom. Taking birth in samsara because of wisdom is a bodhisattva's means for liberation. Wisdom not held by the method is bondage. Wisdom held by the method is liberation. Methods not held by wisdom are bondage. Methods held by wisdom are liberation. Just like, that's like streaming of nectar wisdom from the Buddha. Page 203 and 204 in the third volume of Geshe Zopa's. Okay, another one. So this is most of what my sharing is going to be tonight, is how the six far-reaching practices, how they are broken into different levels of training, how they relate to one another, what their benefits are, how they're part of the method and wisdom aspect of the path. That's so much of what this text is about. I just couldn't bypass it and start on generosity, didn't I? Okay, so the next one is to look at is that the 6 far-reaching practices are encapsulated in the 3 higher trainings, which there is a quote on page 247 here that says, this is from Maitreya, "The victorious one taught the 6 perfections. From the point of the 3 trainings, the first has 3. We'll say, so the first higher training of ethical conduct has generosity, ethical conduct, and fortitude. The last 2 are the other 2. So the 5th meditative stabilization is the 2nd higher training, and wisdom is the 6th far-reaching practice is the 3rd higher training, and 1 is part of all. So that's joyous effort. So that it sort of is subsumed, takes care of all the 3 trainings. Lama Tsongkhapa summarizes this paragraph by saying that the 6 far-reaching practices include all the practices of the Mahayana. And this is what he says, this is how come, why they are so specific. Number 1, the 6 far-reaching practices are sufficient causes for the type of life necessary to support our practice. So if you remember on the Lamrim, one of the main substantial causes for precious human life is the practice of the 6 far-reaching practices. So if we want to have limitless precious human rebirth so that we can generate bodhicitta, to generate the wisdom realizing emptiness, we need to be able to create the sufficient causes for having that type of life. And the 6 far-reaching practices are sufficient causes for that. Number 2, the 6 far-reaching practices are necessary and sufficient practices to achieve 2 goals: his or her own liberation and temporarily satisfying others' needs. So from the very beginning, the 6 far-reaching practices will get us out of samsara, and by practicing them in relationship to sentient beings, we can temporarily satisfy their needs. So temporarily, we can help them with to garner well, to be able to practice well, to be able to show kindness to them, to be able to have some joy, to relate to them in ways that we benefit them in sort of a temporal, worldly way by just having a relationship that fosters their kind hearts, that fosters their virtue. Number 3, the 6 far-reaching practices are a practice necessary to lead others to their ultimate goal. All right, so we're not going to be just satisfied with making sure that the temporary worldly needs of sentient beings are taken care of, but we really want to use the 6 far-reaching practices to lead them to Buddhahood and to their own awakening. The 6 far-reaching practices include all methods of the path, and they show which trainings are accomplished by each perfection. So the training of what kind of mind you have to practice generosity, what kind of mind you have to train to be able to be ethical, fortitude, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom. So all the trainings are totally subsumed. All the teachings are included and complete in the 6 far-reaching practices. Now, saying that, Geshe Zopa reminds us that it's not easy. It's easy to list them, might be, just rattle them off, but they contain every essential bodhisattva practice. And as we go through them, and as this whole thing unfolds over the next few weeks, is that we need to think in detail about the nature of each one of them, how they work, what is involved in generating them, what they accomplish, and how they are related to each other. And by having some sense of that, then we will realize how precious they are, that they're like the well, Geshe Sopa just says they're so precious because they line out precisely how to attain our own temporary and ultimate goals, and by extension, or as a result of that, guide others in doing the same. And here, I really want to focus in on is that we get into when I think about bodhicitta, this whole thing about becoming a Buddha in order to benefit others, that sometimes I forget about myself. I'm one of the countless sentient beings that's included in this aspiration of bodhicitta. That we have to recognize that the bodhisattva path is just not for others' benefit. We are sentient beings as well, and we are direct beneficiaries of our own virtuous endeavors, not just Buddhahood. All right, so we're practicing them to become awakened so we can skillfully guide others by training in the six far-reaching practices, that we can guide others to that same state. But along the way, we are creating and becoming the beneficiaries of extraordinary accumulations of merit. So we have all the conducive circumstances inside and out to be able to walk this long path. So we garner not only the ultimate happiness of awakening, but we also garner the temporal worldly benefit, which is to have these precious human rebirths, one right after the other, building up the accumulation of merit, deepening our understanding of emptiness from just, correct assumption, belief, inference. We are creating a perfect situation for ourselves, and in the process creating the causes to be able to guide all living beings to awakening. So it's a win-win situation. So I always have to remind myself that I'm not just doing this for others. The Buddhahood is one's own welfare and the welfare of others. We have to remember that those two things are very much intertwined. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, okay, let's explain their significance even farther. Okay, so to hold that we are the direct beneficiaries of our own virtuous endeavors, both temporally and ultimately, is that he says, this is Lama Tsongkhapa relying on Haribhadra's long explanation of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 8,000 lines. 3 things. That the 6 far-reaching practices are sufficient for eliminating obstacles to practice. They are sufficient for achieving all qualities of Buddhahood, and they are sufficient for helping sentient beings develop spiritually themselves. All right, so we'll go through these points because there's a lot in them. Once again, this is sort of getting our minds in the mood for really training as bodhisattvas, because there's a lot that we have to accomplish. There's a lot of purification we have to do. There's a lot of merit we have to accumulate. So right from the bat, they are sufficient for eliminating obstacles to our practice. So number 1, okay, this is Geshe Sopa, that they can be inspiring because as beginners we face many obstructions to our spiritual practice. Let's face it, he says, we have little interest in looking beyond the ordinary happiness of just this life. All right, this is the self-acceptance part. Okay, for the most part, when I wake up in the morning, I set my bodhicitta motivation. By breakfast, I'm pretty much thinking about my own happiness of just this life. So Geshe Sopa says we receive some teachings, we do some practice, we gain some wisdom, but many times it's difficult to find the will to practice to achieve something far greater. We've kind of gotten sort of lulled into the happiness of just this life. It's not too bad. Life, I think Carol Scott Assure says, life is good. When she sits in front of me, life is good. I look at this little slogan on the back of her shirt and I say, yeah, sometimes that's what I think, that life in samsara is good. It's okay. So in the beginning, we just face, that's one of the major obstructions, is that we don't have the will, we don't have the wherewithal to look beyond the happiness of this life. So we're not strongly called to generate renunciation and to attain liberation or awakening because we're really quite happy most of the time with just the happiness of this life. So the 6 far-reaching practices show us how, one step at a time, to first solve this immediate problem of these kind of obstacles just starting out. All right, so Geshe Sopa says, okay, the way we think about this, at the get-go, we're going to work on attachment to our wealth, attachment to our kin, attachment to our home, looking how they are huge distractions when we don't place them in a proper relationship to us in our practice. It's not like we give up our family, we give up our possessions, we give up, our wealth and our status. But we've got them on such an elevated level that the 6 far-reaching practices are going to help us to get them down to where we have them to sustain our lives, to be able to connect with people, but not so that they overrun us with the attachment to them. We get too distracted. So then we get a little bit of a handle on our attachment to worldly stuff, okay, and our loved ones. We abandon, so then we abandon some seedy behavior. which has been part of our strategy to feed our attachments. I mean, we've been hooked into the 8 worldly concerns since beginningless time. It's not easy to untangle ourselves from them. So our ethical conduct gets clearer, letting us go, letting some of the attachments, some of the 8 worldly concerns go, cleaning up our behavior, our body and speech get a little bit more in line with, our aspiration. Okay, so now we've got a little bit of, working on our attachments. So we're the antidotes to cultivating generosity. We're working on those. The antidotes to our ethical conduct. We're working on those. But then we see that everywhere we go, we can't seem to avoid those sensing beings that make us so miserable. We try and help them. They just act badly. They refuse our help. They lash out at us. And then we get angry and depressed. So first, it looks like the outside world isn't cooperating with us as we practice. All right, so here we are. We're trying to help beings. We're trying to be generous with them. We're trying to be ethical in relationship to them. And they will have no part of it. They don't want to cooperate. And because we're beginners, we don't have the notion that real bodhisattvas do, which is when they're in the bodhisattva training and somebody comes up to them and screams at them in their face, they say, yippee, a sentient being is pissed off at me. I get to practice. We're not there yet. When somebody is in our face and pissed off at us, we want to retaliate. All right, so the next thing we got to do is that we're going to meet up with difficult people. We're going to or difficult beings. Forget just humans. We got difficult creatures. We got difficult all sorts of beings around us. Where sometimes when it appears that they're going to harm us, we want to retaliate. All right, so fortitude is going to help our ethical conduct sort of stay on a level keel by saying, okay, fortitude is going to help me to keep my ethical conduct somewhat stable. I'm going to not retaliate. I'm going to try not to harm, so I'm going to work on that. Right? So little by little, little by little. But what happens is that, if the sentient beings aren't cooperating with us, so we can practice generosity and ethical conduct, we get discouraged, and then our own minds get in the way of our virtue. So it's no longer other sentient beings that are getting in our way. It's our own minds that are struggling. It's too hard. I can't do it. I'm going to give up. It's over. So we try to create some virtue, but it's hard to sustain it. So this is where fortitude comes in the very beginning, just to give us some encouragement, give us an ability to sustain a little bit of hardship when things don't go our way. To accept that this is the nature of samsara. Samsara is not a physical place. It's having a body and mind under the control of afflictions and karma. So we're going to be running into things. Things are going to knock us down during the course of the day. So fortitude helps us to supports our ability to keep getting up no matter how much we think we're getting knocked down due to our karma and afflictions. All right? The karma is ripening. We're having difficulties. We're meeting unfortunate situations. But as time goes on, with this little bit of fortitude, we get a little bit more resilient. We get a little bit more realistic. We get a little bit more stronger in our minds. We see that this is the ripening of karma. Okay, we're going to work on this. And then having a joyful mind, okay, in the process of all of this, we see that joy with effort usually lessens the hardship. And Venerable Jigme was talking about that today at the teaching. She said, when we bring a little bit of joy, a little bit of willingness, whether it's physical pain or mental pain or hardship, it actually makes it not feel so bad or as bad because we're giving our mind a little bit of support, a little bit of kindness, a little bit of joy. And also joyous effort is a great antidote to laziness, because as we're walking the bodhisattva path, we're going to the laziness of procrastination is going to come up. We're going to say, not today, tomorrow. We're going to have the laziness of busyness. Oh, I've got a lot more fun things to do than think about working on my fortitude. Or the laziness of discouragement. I've been trying and trying. I don't seem to be getting anywhere. Why bother? So joyous effort really keeps us aware in the beginning that those lazinesses are going to show up, and that we're going to really want to be vigilant with them. So then Geshe Sopo goes on to say that these first far-reaching practice, the first 4, solve the problems we have at the beginning of our practice and break down the obstacles to continuing it. Okay, so we're using them to really get us strong, resilient, joyful, stable. Okay, but we might notice that as we go along with our practice, we waste a lot of time, or we minimize the virtue and value of what we are doing. And Geshe Sopa says there's two things that make our practices a wasted effort. Our minds are distracted. They wander off in meditation to all the hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, deluded doubt, remorse, regret, lethargy, rather than on virtue, and lacking the wisdom that understands reality. We are overrun by self-grasping ignorance. So the last two practices, meditative stabilization and wisdom, are the remedies. Okay, so we've gotten the four far-reaching practices helping to deal with getting us in the right direction. But when we go into meditation, we still are kind of confused. We're still get distracted. So then we've got to cultivate both concentration and wisdom, which are the remedies. So meditative stabilization or concentration helps us to slowly grow this capacity to stay focused during a meditation session. Our mind gets clear, gets pliant, is able little by little to focus on our object of meditation for longer periods of time. It supports the learning and understanding the nature of reality, because without it, wisdom can't grow. If there's no clear, stable, pliant, and focused mind, there's no way that wisdom's going to be able to find fertile ground to grow. So we've got to get the mind concentrated. There's different kinds of wisdoms that will come as a result. There's the wisdom that knows to discern what to abandon and what to cultivate. Without this kind of wisdom, we might think that incorrect actions are correct actions, and that correct actions and virtue is non-virtuous. We get all confused on what to abandon and what to cultivate. And without this wisdom, even if we're diligent and patient in all of our efforts to benefit people, if we've got the wrong view or we don't understand how to create the causes for happiness and how to not create the causes for suffering, we're going to be totally on a wrong track. We're going to be going down some dead-end road. From there, the solution is to practice the far-reaching, this wisdom, the far-reaching practice of wisdom not only has this kind of wisdom to learn what to abandon, what to cultivate, but also to understand phenomenal causality and the true nature of reality. So that's the first step when we get into those four far-reaching practices, and how that the second two really sort of are supports and the remedy for all the last stuff, all the wandering mind, the ignorance, the self-grasping ignorance. So they're all, once again, totally interrelated, build on top of one another. The second point is that they are sufficient to achieve all qualities of Buddhahood. The qualities, so this comes right after this first point. The qualities of a Buddha arise directly from meditative stabilization and wisdom. Together, these two get rid of obstacles from the root, and one achieves omniscience in all the qualities of the body, speech, and mind. So the first four far-reaching practices are necessary causes for concentration. Generosity is important because you can't concentrate if you're attached to your life, your wealth, your family, your stuff, your reputation. Ethical conduct eliminates these distractions and keeps the mind in accord with virtue. Fortitude and joyous effort ensure that we're not bothered by external hardships or discouraged by long practice. So all of those, once again, upon this foundation, we can develop concentration. And then with the stable and firm mind, we can meditate on emptiness. So this is all about achieving all the qualities of the Buddhahood. Once again, they're all like the causes for having the kind of mind that has these qualities that are the qualities of a Buddha. They're all necessary, and they are all sufficient unto themselves, to each other. They contain all the causes for Buddhahood. And then the third point is that the far-reaching practices are sufficient for helping sentient beings develop spiritually. So this third one is all about our relationship to other beings. All right, so we're working so hard on our training, we're working so hard on getting our mind clear, on practicing the far-reaching practices, but then we've got to engage in activity. And this is in relationship to sentient beings, heart to heart, face to face, training our mind to see their kindness, to see their suffering, to see their potential, and fueled by our wish to guide them and to liberate them. This is like the third point. This is like, all right, I'm getting the causes together to now be able to benefit sentient beings in some sort of wise way. So the far-reaching practices really lead to this third point. Okay, so then just to kind of give us more good ideas about the 6 far-reaching practices is some of the results that we experience by practicing them, by training in them. Okay, so this once again gives us a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of inspiration on what are some of the results of being able to train our minds in these paramitas. So the first one, to train our minds in generosity. It results in being born having whatever we need. Wealth is not an accident. It's garnered from previous lifetimes of being generous. Okay, so the far-reaching practice of generosity garners circumstances in the future where we're not out there begging, we're not out there struggling for work, we're not out there trying to keep a roof over our heads. We have all of the temporal conditions to have abundance and prosperity, which makes training in the Bodhisattva practices a whole lot easier because we're not scrambling. The practice of ethical conduct results in a beautiful human body and a long life. It's virtuous conduct of not harming others, avoiding destructive actions, and keeping our body, speech, and mind in virtue. So if we have a long life, the longer the better, so that we can continue to practice and create the causes for awakening. Having a beautiful human body, people are going to be naturally attracted to us. So if we have some wisdom, we have some compassion in our minds, we can benefit them right from the get-go because they're going to be drawn to us due to our attractive persona. The third cause for this excellent life is fortitude, treating others respectfully even after they've harmed you, results in having environments like the Abbey. You know, when I think about the Abbey, we as a community and as individuals have practiced fortitude in a very profoundly deep way to be able to live in such a beautiful surrounding. And we've also, one of the results of fortitude is that we have helpful companions. People are drawn to us, and even those who meet you for the first time will feel comfortable around you. So somewhere in our past lives we have practiced fortitude to have the kind of excellent surroundings and having good Dharma friends, people who support us. Joyous effort results in accomplishing any goals or endeavors one undertakes in life. Without it, one is scattered and ineffective. So from my understanding that this is, temporal goals, so if you want to endeavor some worldly thing, to have right livelihood or to do something creative in the world, from joyous effort, being able to start a project and finish it despite hardships and obstacles, and particularly if you do that in relationship to virtuous activities. In our next life, no matter how hard things get, we seem to have a joy and a willingness and a enthusiasm, and we complete things. You know, it would be really a shame if we spent all of these lifetimes trying to create virtue and the Bodhisattva's training, and then due to some negative karma from not completing tasks. Like at the Abbey here, to be able to complete something from start to finish with joy and dedicating it with the bodhicitta motivation is creating the cause to be able to have this kind of mind of joyous effort in the future. So, dropping things, not finishing them, not, doing virtuous activities, so that you can really accomplish it for the benefit of others, that's what really keeps this whole joyous effort going. Meditative stabilization or concentration results in a stable, focused, and clear mind, makes the mind ready and receptive to the teachings on the nature of reality. So concentration is one of the main causes on being able to hear those teachings on emptiness and have them land on somewhat of a stable, clear ground so they don't go into some dark void or some dirty place or some confused state. So concentration, being able to develop that somewhat this life will give us the causes to have a mind that's ready to receive the teachings on the nature of reality. And then wisdom is the cause for understanding emptiness. It cuts the binds to samsara, and is from this wisdom side of the path is one of the main causes for Buddhahood. So as much as all the teachings that we receive in this life about wisdom, boy, whatever we can let go in there, whatever we can think about, whatever we can get familiar with, is just to continue to hold that, knowing that we are creating the causes to be able to meet the Dharma in the future and just go, gosh, that sounds familiar. I like this teaching. There are people who come here to the Abbey and they just love teachings on emptiness. They may have never heard them before, but they're like drawn to it. I'd have to think that somewhere in the past they've heard the teachings before and they just feel immediate connection to them. Okay, so a little bit more, folks. So far, so good? All right, this is really, I love this stuff. Okay, so why are they cultivated in this order? Okay, they are in this order because the former influences the latter. This is Geshe Zopa's take on this. Generosity is like waving a flag to sentient beings saying, "Hi, I'm here. I have something for you. I will do my best to support you in whatever way serves you temporally and ultimately." So that's why generosity is the first one, that it invites relationship with sentient beings. Hi, I have some food. I have some talent. I have some skills. I have some ideas. I have some medical care. Come. Through generosity, we garner material wealth that can, in small ways, alleviate poverty of others and support them constructively. Okay, so that's the first. That's the big flag. It is the foundation. Okay. But if we harm them in any way, physically or verbally, that generosity will ripen in some worldly way, like finding a $5 bill on the sidewalk. All right. So all of that waving of flags, if we harm them in some way because they either don't accept our gift, or they destroy it, or they burn it, or they give it away, we get pissed off. That we did the generous action, but it's going to ripen in some little small thing, like winning a cash, lottery ticket for $100 or something like that. So generosity is the foundation of ethical conduct, because if we have less attachment towards our livelihood, wealth, and sense pleasures, it becomes easier to take and keep the precepts. So ethical conduct underneath generosity, okay, we're working on lessening our attachment, giving things with lots of joy, with no sense of loss. It helps our minds won't be so craving, so grasping, so clinging, and then the precepts get to be a little bit easier to hold. No killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no divisive speech, no harsh speech, no taking intoxicants. Once we get it, kind of let go of our grasp on all the worldly stuff, reputation, body, wealth, family, then ethical conduct is a little easier to keep our precepts. Restraining from harm is part of the Bodhisattva practice, but what happens when we are harmed? Ethical conduct can't possibly be maintained if we respond to harm by retaliating. All right, so we've got our end. We're trying to be kind, we're trying to be ethical, but the other person is not there yet. And they come at us with all sorts of, weapons of either verbal, physical, emotional, and, we're like this. Right? So fortitude is going to help us to drop the gloves, drop the boxing gloves, and to support our ethical conduct. By not retaliating, we prevent conflict, as well as prevent the other person from creating more negative karma. It makes our ethical conduct very firm and very stable, because we're not throwing a match onto their fuel. And that's some of the things that we really try to do here in community is, if someone's really struggling with some afflictions, the last thing you want to do is, turn on a Bic lighter, or set a match and throw it at them. Joyous effort is needed because it supports the practice of fortitude. The path is always going to have difficulties and hardships are going to arise. This is a mantra that we've been saying the past few days. Joyous effort gives us the energy to transform the difficulties of life into opportunities to grow. All right, so that's what makes the mind be able to turn. You need the energy to do it, because sometimes trying to turn a really hard, heavy-duty habit is like turning an oil tanker in the middle of the ocean. It's like 1 day, 2 days. It's like cranking it as far as you can. It just takes a long time, but with joyous effort, much easier. Meditative stabilization helps us joyous effort supports meditative stabilization because it really does take some time to garner a strong, stable, and serviceable mind, and doing it without gritting our teeth, doing it without furrowing our brow, doing it without discouragement. So joyous effort really helps to our concentration to be able to just keep going without feeling discouraged. And then a focused, clear mind, conjoined with wisdom, We can offer wise advice about the Dharma. We can show others how to practice the path. And we can also show them how to free themselves from cyclic existence. So being able to understand the nature of reality, we have the whole world opens up as to what we can possibly share with sentient beings. So they are called perfections or far-reaching because they direct us to accomplish the welfare of others and by attaining the perfected state of Buddhahood where we will be of the greatest benefit. So there's different ways of why they're called perfections or far-reaching. That's one of them, and also when they're informed by the wisdom realizing emptiness as well. And last but not least, I wanted to so we're not going to get to generosity, folks, I don't think. Okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? Jimpa. So last but not least, I've always I'm beginning to understand these a little bit more, but it's the 4 ways to gather disciples. I always was suspect of these because of my little mind, that's attached to reputation, to status, to fame. But they're part of the far-reaching practices, is that the Buddha taught this to enable bodhisattvas to reach out to sentient beings with their bodhicitta motivation. So if you have this beautiful bodhicitta motivation that you want to attain awakening in order to benefit sentient beings, you have to find ways to gather them around you so that you can teach them and guide them. In order to lead them to freedom and awakening, we first have to gather them around us. Otherwise, Geshe Sopa says, we will be running all around trying to meet them one at a time, which is going to take a really, really long time because sentient beings are limitless. So we're going to be doing one person, okay, teach them the Dharma, okay, we're done. Second person, teach them the Dharma, then we're done. So the ways in which we do that is, first of all, we give them what they need. So here's that flag, okay? Food, clothing, service, talent, skill, advice, support. All right, so the first way we gather disciples is to take care of some of their temporal material needs. Physical support. That will help us to connect with them because we all need physical support. The second one, to gather disciples, we want to gather them close by using kind, loving, and wise speech, not by sweet-talking them for something, but sharing the Dharma with them according to what their capacity is. So this is the encouraging speech, the supportive speech, the, good enough, dear. I think that was Lama Yeshe's really beautiful, just to gather his disciples. Good enough, dear. Good enough, dear. The third way to gather disciples is to do whatever is necessary to achieve their goal. This is actually doing something, not just giving them advice, okay? This is not, okay, let me tell you how to invest your money in the stock market. I mean, that's some of it. But it's much more about encouraging them to practice virtue, to think about the teachings, and really supporting them in their practice. All right, so that's the third way to gather disciples, is to really do whatever is necessary to support them along the path. And fourth, and I think is probably the most important one, is practice what you preach. All right, follow your own advice. If you're going to be giving all these, sharing the Dharma with people and giving them advice and connecting with them and being generous with them, and you're out there doing whatever you darn well please, it's not going to help. And it's going to actually probably hinder a lot of people being able to connect, because once you start practicing the Dharma, people really connect with you. When they find out that you're practicing the Dharma, they watch. They want to see, is that practice, is that path really helping that person? Wow. Look at how they're practicing. I can see a difference in their mind. I can see a difference in the way that they relate. Yeah, there's really something attractive about that when we really walk our talks. So when we're out there, feeding the turkeys or feeding the kitties and stuff like that, talking them with sweet, kind words, saying mantra, leading them to whatever's necessary to achieve their goal, is to keep them from not killing, making sure that they're safe. So we're also trying to help them to achieve their goal, which is awakening. So we do this by, gathering disciples in whatever form they are now. I mean, they could be in all sorts of forms. So it's not just human form, it's also the forms of other beings. So that's kind of as far as we've gotten, as I'm going to go. Any comments or questions?
I think Jeffrey mentioned what you mentioned before about how bodhisattvas, when they enter into meditation on emptiness, they'll meditate on bodhicitta first, so that whilst bodhicitta isn't manifest during that session, it's affecting it somehow. I understand the words, but when I really think about it, I don't really get how or what that really means. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I would have to think spontaneous bodhicitta never leaves the mind of a bodhisattva. So when they go into the practice on meditative equipoise, even though it's not manifest, it's not gone. Because Geshe Sopa says it empowers, it imbues, almost like imbues. It gives it some sort of flavor. I don't know how, he says empowers it. So you're doing you're going into it with a very, very clear reason. You're not doing it for self-liberation. You're doing it for Buddhahood, and you're doing it in order to benefit others. So even though that drops away in meditative equipoise, it's in there. The continuity of mind, it's dormant. It's not manifest, but it's not like it's not there. Bodhicitta doesn't ever leave the mind of a bodhisattva. It goes manifest or unmanifest. For us, because it's so fabricated, I can't even imagine what that would be like. So that's the best way that I can explain. He just said to empower it. So maybe if Venerable Tarpa, Venerable Jigme, to have that mind.
There's a debate about that with the different colleges. And I could look up my notes about that. It's in the book by Yangtze Rinpoche. But what I remember from talking with Jeffrey is that it was kind of the idea of like if you're in mourning, there's this flavor in your mind that you carry around no matter what you're doing. So the force of it lingers. It was kind of like that, and something that I could relate to, think of it in that way.
Flavor is a good word. But I think we're talking about, when a bodhisattva is in meditative equipoise, they've got, spontaneous bodhicitta as part of their mode of existence. So it never leaves them in some way, except in meditative equipoise. But it's got to be influencing or doing something there. Flavor is a good word.
A substantial cause of a moment of mind is the previous moment of mind also. And so you're starting with bodhicitta and then going into equipoise. It's the previous moment of mind. It's got to affect it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question comes because the emptiness realized by arhats is the same emptiness realized by bodhisattvas. So then my mind goes, okay, so how does the bodhicitta affect that realization then, in terms of would the impact of the realization be more powerful after the fact? Just that, I guess that's where my mind is coming at it from, in terms of the implications of the realization afterwards. If there's only one emptiness to be realized and that's shared, but then only the bodhisattvas have the bodhicitta. So.
But coming out of in subsequent attainment, let's say the bodhisattva gets off their cushion, they've just spent 3 hours in meditative equipoise. They go to breakfast, and the first thing they think of is the kindness of all the sentient beings who made that piece of toast. It just arises. They can't help themselves. They see the emptiness of that piece of bread, that it lacks any inherent existence, but they also see who brought this piece of bread to my toaster. And then they just go off into the kindness of others. So they can either look at it through the method side of the path and subsequent attainment, or they can look at it just totally imbued by that meditative equipoise. So they're seeing that piece of bread as lacking any inherent existence from it. It's merely labeled. And on top of it is dependent arising. This is once again, this emptiness and dependent arising. they inform each other, even in subsequent attainment. I mean, that's where they kind of abide. At least in a bodhisattva's mind, that's what I think, is that they're continually going, held, wisdom, held, emptiness, held, wisdom, held, method, held, wisdom, held, method. In and out, in and out. I just get totally enthralled by the idea of being able to come out of meditative equipoise, go into my life, and to be able to have bodhicitta right there. But then empowered by the wisdom realizing emptiness. So you're not looking at that toast as inherently existent. It's being informed. Although you're not in meditative equipoise, the flavor of that practice is now influencing how you're looking at that piece of toast. One teacher, many traditions, has this little piece on how bodhicitta enriches wisdom, how wisdom is enriched by bodhicitta. Maybe we need to refresh ourselves. Yeah, they're not, yeah. I keep going like this. I keep wanting to weave a piece of cloth when I look at these teachings.